The fast trucks carrying emergency food relief have arrived in Moroto district, bringing hope to thousands of families struggling with severe food shortages. The consignment transported by the National Enterprise Corporation (NEC) was officially received by the resident district commissioner Benon Kwichideza alongside district officials.
So on behalf of the Moroto district local government and on behalf of Karamoja, I want to appreciate His Excellency the President and the Office of the Prime Minister for the very quick intervention.
Moroto district is expected to receive 781,410 kilograms of relief food comprising maize flour and beans. The food will be distributed to more than 26,000 households across the district's 41 parishes, targeting families most affected by the prolonged dry spell. The emergency intervention follows months of failed harvests caused by prolonged drought, which has left thousands of households without adequate food. Local leaders say more than 20 people have died in the region during the food crisis, prompting government to fast-track the relief program. The Minister for Karamoja Affairs, John Baptist Loki, has urged beneficiaries to use the food responsibly and avoid selling it. He says the relief is intended to sustain vulnerable families as government works on longer-term solutions to food insecurity.
This food should not be wasted. Let us use this food sparingly, because we don't know the next time we shall receive food again. So use this food sparingly. We are warning all the beneficiaries, nobody should sell this food. It is labeled, the bags are well labeled, that this food was provided by the government of Uganda through the Office of the Prime Minister.
Minister of State Esther Anyakun says the government is working with humanitarian partners to support malnourished children under the age of 5 and strengthen school feeding interventions to protect learners from the effects of hunger.
And I want to thank the partners. Today we have been meeting, and we are going to meet even tomorrow, the World Food Programme, the UNICEF. Government is going to the households, World Food, the partners are going to the schools so that our children are able to go to school, and also other partners like UNICEF is holding the issue of nutrition.
District leaders say the distribution exercise will begin immediately, with priority being given to the most vulnerable households as authorities continue monitoring the food situation across Moroto.
Now, let's move on to the elections. There was excitement across several parts of Kampala from early hours of the morning as victorious candidates in the Women's Council elections celebrated their victories through their respective villages. However, in some areas, candidates raised concerns after questioning the eligibility of some individuals who had turned up at polling stations, claiming they were unfamiliar to the local community. Despite the isolated disputes, the voting process continued, with some candidates emerging victorious while others conceded defeat.
By around 8 a.m., election officials had already arrived at Katale Zone in Wandegia, where voters and candidates had also assembled in preparation for the exercise. The polling station was officially designated as a voting center before officials conducted the mandatory voter roll call. One by one, registered voters were called and proceeded to stand behind the candidates of their choice in line with Uganda's village election voting procedure. However, midway through the roll call, NRM candidate Rehma Chinabi challenged the participation of several people who had already lined up to vote, arguing that they were not known residents of the area. She demanded that election officials verify the voter register before the exercise could proceed. These complaints prompted Kampala RCC Haji Umarule to temporarily suspend the election and order a fresh verification of the voters' register. The situation also forced police officers to intervene and restore order after tension began escalating. Security personnel first removed non-voters, particularly men, from the polling area to allow the exercise to continue peacefully. Although the election resumed, Rehma remained dissatisfied after election officials confirmed that everyone whose name had been called appeared on the official voters' register. Moments later, she abandoned the voting process midway through the exercise, an action that contravenes the electoral guidelines governing the elections. Voting stretched until midday as officials continued reading out the voters' register. Throughout the process, nearly every voter lined up behind independent candidate Harriet Nambiru, who consistently attracted queues almost 3 times longer than those of her rivals. When the final tally was announced, Nambiru secured a landslide victory of more than 270 votes, comfortably defeating 4 opponents, including NUP's Jalia Nachigozi, who managed just 5 votes. Both Nambiru and Nachigozi criticized the earlier attempts to disrupt the election, despite voters having already demonstrated a clear preference for their candidate. Meanwhile, at Remand, a village in Shariako, the voting exercise was equally tense despite the relatively low voter turnout among women. Election officials carefully cordoned off the polling area before the voting process began. However, candidates and voters also questioned the eligibility of some people who had turned up to vote, insisting that they were unknown in the village and demanded another verification of the voters' register. The situation prompted both the military and police to deploy to the area to maintain order before the election resumed. Officials continued calling out voters one by one before they lined up behind their preferred candidates, after which the votes were counted and winners declared.
At the start it was vague. I feared, but later on I became happy because people were behind me. There is a problem of what? Of deleting people from the register.
Overall, Kampala Regional Elections Officer Jennifer Choutunji described as peaceful the overall elections process in Kampala.
We've gotten a few complaints here and there of the people who are not in the registers and they want to participate. But the law is very clear and we follow the law. If you don't come to register at the time of registration and if you're not in the register, there is no way you can participate.
Now let's move on to the West, where women across Mbarara turned up in large numbers to vote in the Women's Council elections, demonstrating a strong determination to shape local leadership despite widespread allegations of voter rigging and administrative disputes over voter identification. While polling proceeded smoothly in several areas, tensions flared over voting guidelines. Candidates in multiple polling centres raised concerns over potential vote manipulation and demanded that voters present national identification cards before lining up to vote.
At several polling stations in Mbarara City, voters were ready by 9 a.m. At Kachika Cell, names started to be read as voters entered the gate. Here, voting started at 11:20 a.m. and by midday, they were done. According to polling officials, the election registered a high voter turnout with calm process of the election.
Today the turnout was good. We had 80 voters who came and were present. Some of the people delayed. It started around 11. So we had that, but they came all at once. That helped us to finish in time.
However, a standoff escalated in Rwebihuru Cell, where voting was delayed until 2 p.m. due to a dispute raised by the National Resistance Movement NRM candidate Birungi Peace.
Let them bring IDs. We check whether they are the ones who are in that register.
Birungi insisted that voters present national IDs to prove their identity. This demand directly contradicted the Electoral Commission guidelines, which stipulate that any verified resident known to the community and listed on the village register is eligible to vote regardless of whether they hold a national ID.
They baptized some people. They gave them those names of those people who shifted. They brought them here. They are going to vote. I'm not going to relate to that.
The prolonged argument in Rwebihuro necessitated heavy deployment of security personnel to maintain order, restore peace, and allow polling process to eventually commence.
But I heard people alleging that maybe they were the names were not corresponding with the new numbers. But we have tried to establish, but we have really failed. But in other polling stations, the exercise is done already. But this one here, it is always